Change our style. What's that?
Change their style.
Change our style.
But it's really meant to.
I mean, did you ever get some toys or games, as a gift? With it after a while. You're not satisfied. Desires, more desires. Margaret.
Sometimes, I still be pushed around by time.
By time, just inevitable time.
Pleasure.
Seeking of pleasure. Seeking of pleasure.
Circumstances.
Circumstances. Here it is in a nutshell. According to our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, we make changes all the time in our life due to dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is the driving force for change. Right? Like if you have a perfect recipe, say you've got a perfect recipe for something like burfi, you're not going to change that recipe, right? It's perfect. If you change it, it'll only get worse. So dissatisfaction causes us to make changes. So some of you may remember that there was a music group in the 70s. Well, I guess they're still alive and well, actually, called the Rolling Stones. And they have a song called Satisfaction. And the lyrics basically say, I can't get no satisfaction. But I try, and I try, and I try, and again I try, and I try, and I try. Despite all my efforts, I can't get no satisfaction. Excuse the improper English grammar, but that's how their lyrics go. It should say, I can't get any satisfaction, not I can't get no satisfaction.
Double negative.
Yes. So their point was that I'm fried. I'm so fried, I'm trying like anything to find satisfaction and I can't find it. So what's wrong with this picture? Why can't I find any? Am I barking up the wrong tree, perhaps? Tulsi, have you heard this expression, barking up the wrong tree? I think we discussed it once here, right? Did we? What does that mean? You're barking up the wrong tree. So there once was a dog. Listen to this, Prahlad. Hey, Prahlad, listen to this. Once there was a dog, and he was walking around, and he saw a squirrel. What do dogs do when they see a squirrel? They chase it. So the dog started chasing the squirrel. But the squirrel was running really quickly. And the dog just kept chasing it. And then the squirrel, being very intelligent, ran up a tree. Because what is it that dogs can't do? They can't climb trees. Cats can climb trees. Dogs cannot climb trees. So this very smart squirrel said, I'm going to escape the dog by running up a tree. So he ran up a tree. And the dog went to the base of the tree and he kept jumping like this on the trunk of the tree, barking, barking, barking. Because he said, if I just sit here and bark, like I'll put a real ferocious bark, I'll show my teeth and I'll growl and I'll bark, and that squirrel will just get so scared that it'll have a heart attack and drop to the ground, and then I'll catch it. So the dog kept barking and barking and barking. However, that tree was not just sitting there all by itself. There were other trees around it. So the squirrel is very intelligent. He simply went out on a limb and jumped from this tree to the next tree. So he was in tree number 2, but the dog kept barking up tree number 1. So is he ever going to get the squirrel that way? So the expression is, you're barking up the wrong tree. Right? So this is what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. My dear spirit soul, the reason you can't find satisfaction, just like Mick Jagger wrote in his song, though I try and I try and I try, I can't get no satisfaction. Why? He didn't know why. He didn't actually, he was not able to answer the question. He put it out there as a song, and he had big followers, like one of their big hit songs. I guess it still is. And nobody could answer the question why he couldn't get any satisfaction. So sometimes people commit suicide because they think there's something wrong with me, right? I'm trying so hard and I can't find any satisfaction. Other people look happy and I don't. So there must be something wrong with me, so they commit suicide. Because nobody's told them how to find satisfaction. So in Bhagavad Gita, well, first of all, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna impresses upon Arjuna the need to find satisfaction. One should not say, oh, sour grapes. How about, hey, Tulsi, do you know that one? The story of sour grapes. So one time there was a wolf. And have you seen grapevines? Yeah, so they're like, they can be so far off the ground, but like off the ground, right? They're growing on some...
I think I know it.
You know that story? Okay. So this wolf, he saw these grapes and they were hanging on their little trellis or whatever it's called up here. And he said, I want those grapes. So he jumped to grab the grapes and he missed it by like 4 inches. So then he backed up and he took a running start and he jumped again. Oh, missed it by 3 inches. And now he backs up a lot more and he gives it its best. He gives it his best and he runs at the speed of light and he jumps up as high as he possibly can. Oh, and he missed those grapes by 1.5 inches. And it became obvious to him, I can't jump that high. And then he said, oh, they were probably just sour grapes anyway. Right? So he's looking for satisfaction and he thinks, I'm going to get it through those juicy grapes. But when he fails to achieve it, it probably wasn't worth it anyway. They were sour. But they weren't sour, actually. So this is the conditioned soul in the material world. They're looking for satisfaction by barking up the wrong tree. And when they fail to find satisfaction, the grapes were sour. So in Bhagavad Gita, right at the beginning there in chapter 2, Krishna impresses upon Arjuna why it's important to find satisfaction. He says to Arjuna, let's go to that verse, it's 266. He says to Arjuna that if one is not connected with the Supreme, see, he tells Arjuna that your problem is you're barking up the wrong tree. You're barking up the tree of materialism. Yeah, sense gratification, materialism. So if you keep barking up the material tree, you'll never find satisfaction. So Krishna says, you should bark up this tree over here, the spiritual world, the spiritual life. And that's where you'll find satisfaction. So he tells Arjuna that if you're not connected with the Supreme, that is, if you don't look for your happiness in the spiritual aspect of life, then you cannot have transcendental intelligence, nor can you have a steady or satisfied mind. A steady mind is a mind that's satisfied. How's that? Just like, why are you changing your job every 3 months? You quit that job and get another job. Oh, then you quit that job and get another job. Then you quit that job, get another job. Because you can't find satisfaction in any job that you look at. Similarly, the mind is looking for, a subject to meditate on. The mind wants to be absorbed in something. The mind actually wants to dedicate itself to a subject matter. So I absorb my mind in my work, and then that doesn't give me satisfaction, so on the weekend, when work is over, I have to go to the bars and, alter my consciousness. I try to absorb my consciousness, my mind, in my family, but then, that doesn't really give me all that satisfaction, so I'm looking for this. So Krishna says, you have to have a steady, satisfied mind. And unless the mind finds that subject matter that it can just hone in on and stay there permanently, then the mind will continue to wander and be dissatisfied. Just like an airplane, Prabhupada uses this example. Say a spaceship goes out into space, way out there in outer space. It's got nothing, it's just out there in the ether. But if it doesn't find something to land on, like supposedly they think they're going to land on other planets, let's say they could, if they don't find something to land on, then that airplane, that spaceship has to just keep cruising around. It can't find a platform to put its 2 feet down. So like that, the mind will just keep going like this all over the place. So Krishna says, Arjuna, if you don't connect yourself with the Supreme, you will not have a steady, satisfied mind. And what happens when we don't have a steady, satisfied mind? Are we happy? Are we happy? What do you think, Radhika? No, you're not happy. And if you're not happy, there's no question of peace. Without happiness, where's the question of peace, right? Without peace, where's the question of happiness? They go together. So we have to have a satisfied mind, a peaceful mind, then we can be happy. So our lesson is that we're not going to find that peace and happiness in the material world. And some people, even as devotees, we do fall victim of Maya. And we get tricked into thinking that we will find happiness here. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the story of stuff. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
The story of stuff. So one person did this research, and he wrote a little, I guess it's a book. Anyway, it's called The Story of Stuff. And his research showed that the more choices a person has in this material world, the more unhappy they become. You used to be able to go to the store and there were like 2 or 3 flavors of soda pop, drink. Go to the store, 2, 3 choices, options. You pick one and that's it. Now you go to the store and there's this huge wall, right? Of like 57 different flavors, and then each flavor has sugar-free or caffeine-free, or you end up having like 100 options when you just want to go buy a silly soda to drink. You go to buy a car. It used to be you had 2 choices, Model A or Model B. Now you go shopping for a car, and you can't figure out what to buy. Because there's like, 60 choices out there, or more. So the story of stuff, the researcher found that the more choices you have, the more dissatisfied you become with what you chose. Why? Because when you chose, I chose A. Out of the 500 different choices, I chose number 1. And you bring it home, and does it satisfy you? Yes or no? No. By definition, anything material can't satisfy the soul. So the self is not satisfied. So now you lament that I made the wrong choice. Oh my God, out of 50, I chose the one that doesn't satisfy me. I have 49 other choices that probably would have made me happy. So anyway, the research showed that the more choices one has, the less happy they are. So it's not true that the more we increase our materialism, the happier I'm going to become. It's actually quite the opposite. So what is the solution to satisfaction then? So, if we go to the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, called The Opulence of the Absolute, near the beginning there, in text 4 and 5, Krishna is describing different qualities that the living entities display, and one of them is called satisfaction. And in the purport, Prabhupada says that tushti, or satisfaction, the word is tushti. It means that one should not be eager to gather more and more material goods by unnecessary activity. One should be satisfied with whatever is obtained by the grace of the Supreme Lord. That is called satisfaction. In the 13th chapter, where Krishna, in texts 8 through 12, lists the qualities of a person in knowledge. Like, are you a person of knowledge? Oh, yes, 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 I'm a person of knowledge. We'll all raise our hand. I'm a person of knowledge. I'm a very knowledgeable person, right? See my PhD diploma on the wall? I'm a knowledgeable person. And Krishna says, well, here's the test of if you're actually a knowledgeable person. And he lists something like 20 qualities of a knowledgeable person. And one of them is the very, very first one, which is, upon which all others will ultimately rest, is humility. And Prabhupada describes humility in his purport. He says, humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. In other words, if we're satisfied being honored by others, that's an unhealthy satisfaction. It's called pride, actually. It's the opposite of humility. So, a person of knowledge, Krishna says, is humble. And they don't seek satisfaction through things, and they don't even seek satisfaction through honor. So now the question is, well then how do we find satisfaction? So this will be in text 9 of chapter 10, which we have written on the board. This is a very important verse. Texts in chapter 10, texts 8, 9, 10, and 11 are considered the 4 nutshell verses of Bhagavad Gita. So text number 9, maybe we can repeat. I'll say, you say. Machchitta madgata prana. Machchitta madgata prana. Bodhayanta parasparam. Bodhayanta parasparam. Katayantascha mam nityam. Katayantascha mam nityam. Tushyanti cha ramanti cha. Tushyanti cha ramanti cha. Word for word synonyms, please repeat. Machchitta. Their minds fully engaged in me. Matgata prana. Their lives devoted to me. Bodhayanta, preaching, parasparam, among themselves, Katayanta, talking, cha, also, mam, about me, nityam, perpetually, and here's our word, tushyanti, become pleased, cha, also, ramanti, enjoy transcendental bliss, cha, also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So Krishna says to Arjuna, the thoughts of my pure devotees. See, the pure devotees, Krishna is highlighting to Arjuna his pure devotees. He's asking Arjuna, in a nutshell, he's really just asking Arjuna, become my pure devotee. And it takes him 18 chapters to explain to Arjuna how to be a pure devotee. Right? It's one thing for me to say, hey, Abhimanyu, just be a pure devotee. Well, okay, duh, how do I do that? You know, what does that look like? So here Krishna's explaining what it looks like. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service. And they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. Purport: pure devotees, whose characteristics are mentioned here, engage themselves fully in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Right? Their minds are not like that airplane which has no locus standi, no, place to sit. Their minds are fixed. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Their talks are solely on the transcendental subjects. No prajalpa. The symptoms of the pure devotees are described in this verse specifically. Devotees of the Supreme Lord are 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself. And in the mature stage, they're actually situated in love of God. So this is an interesting sentence. Whether one's an immature devotee or a mature devotee, both are experiencing pleasure. But the immature devotee, or the beginning devotee, is finding pleasure in the service itself. Like, I really enjoy cooking, or I really enjoy making garlands, or I really enjoy playing musical instruments for Krishna, etc., etc. But in the advanced stage, the mature stage, they're actually situated in love of God, means I find pleasure in the object of my service. It's not just that I enjoy cooking, because if you in fact enjoy cooking, you get a lot of pleasure out of cooking, well heck, you could just leave the temple and go get a job cooking at some big famous restaurant, make lots of money. You'll enjoy that. But when you cook for Krishna, you get some reciprocation from Krishna, so you enjoy cooking for Krishna. But in the mature stage, one actually gets their pleasure in love of God. Meaning, they're actually experiencing Krishna, no matter what the service is. Even if, I'm not cooking, which is the thing I love to do, instead I'm scrubbing the toilets in the public bathroom, and I'm cleaning the floor, and taking out the garbage, and whatever. But they're getting the same bliss, because they're not finding satisfaction in the particulars of the service, but in the person to whom they're serving. Anyway, it's a subtle but significant difference. Once situated in that transcendental position, they can relish the highest perfection, which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. And what is that highest perfection? Just pure loving exchanges. Lord Chaitanya likens transcendental devotional service to the sowing of a seed in the heart of the living entity. There are innumerable living entities traveling throughout the different planets of the universe, and out of them, there are a few who are fortunate enough to meet a pure devotee and get the chance to understand devotional service. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, and if he goes on hearing and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, that seed fructifies, just as the seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahmajyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In the spiritual sky also, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. Gradually, as a plant grows fruits and flowers, that plant of devotional service also produces fruits. And the watering process, in the form of chanting and hearing, goes on. This plant of devotional service is fully described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It is explained there that when the complete plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord. Just as a fish cannot live without water. Right? What do you think, Prahlad? If you took a fish out of the lake and put him on the beach, do you think he would be happy? Why?
Because the fish likes water than land.
Mm-hmm. So where does he belong?
In the water.
In the water. So what would happen if you happened to go to the beach and you saw a fish flopping around on the beach and he was complaining that he's not happy? Would you give him some money to make him happy?
No.
Would you give him some toys to make him happy?
No.
Would you give him some cake and ice cream to make him happy?
No.
No. What would you do to make him happy?
You have to put him in the water.
Put him back where he belongs, in his natural environment, the water. So Prabhupada's making an analogy here. Analogy means we compare one thing that we're not completely understanding to something that we do understand. He says, when our devotional plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. So the point is, our natural condition, just like the fish's natural condition is to live in the water, our natural condition is to live in loving exchanges with Krishna. And unless and until we get put into that position of 24 hours daily, Prabhupada said earlier in this purport, not part-time. It's not a part-time job. This is a full-time job. It doesn't mean 8 hours a day, it means 24 hours a day. It's not 40 hours a week, right? It's 7 times 24. So, yeah. Unless and until we're absorbed 24 hours a day in Krishna's loving service, we're not in our proper position. We're like a fish that at least is partially out of the water. And sometimes we're like a fish that's fully out of the water. So the only solution is to get totally drowned in the ocean of love of God, which is what Lord Chaitanya's movement's all about. Lord Chaitanya came for a particular purpose. Well, he had his internal reasons and he had his external reasons. So one of his particular external reasons is to drown the world in love of God. Prabhupada often comments how the ocean, it never goes beyond its, its level, the shore. Sometimes rivers overflood, right? You hear about it all the time. The Mississippi River will flood, and acres and acres and acres and miles of land will just get flooded. Big rivers have a tendency sometimes to flood when there's too much melting of the snow and ice in the springtime. But you never find, no matter how bad the winter was, how much snow and ice there was, no matter how much rain there is, you never see the ocean rise above sea level. It's called sea level for a reason. That is the level. It doesn't go up or down. But Lord Chaitanya has a special ocean, and it's called the ocean of love of God. And that ocean does have the ability to rise in its level and to actually flood the entire earth. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, out of great compassion for the living entities, knew more than anybody else that you can't be happy. You can't be peaceful. You'll never find any satisfaction. You'll continue singing the blues. I can't find no satisfaction. You'll just be singing that song lifetime after lifetime. Unless and until you take to this process. And what is this process? Becoming purified of our ignorance. That makes us think we're going to find satisfaction in something other than Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's whole mission is to bring knowledge of Krishna consciousness to each and every soul so that they can actually become satisfied. Isn't that the greatest welfare work? Just like Prahlad very correctly answered the question. There's a fish that's suffering, and you, the fool, approach that fish and offer him $1 million in charity. Oh, I will give this fish a bunch of gold coins to see how charitable I am. Oh, maybe he's hungry, I'll give it some cake and ice cream. Oh, he's lonely, I'll give him a girlfriend. What? Because you don't know what will actually make that fish happy. You do all these ignorant things. So Lord Chaitanya knows what will actually make the soul happy. So he and his associates came to break open the storehouse of love of God. There's an unlimited storehouse of love of God. And the more you take the supplies out, like we might have a storage cabinet, say we've got 300 pounds of rice in storage. Well, if this week you use 20 pounds of rice, how much rice do you have left? 280 pounds of rice. Then the next week you take another 20 out, It just keeps going down, down. Pretty soon you have nothing in your storehouse. So we're reluctant to open our storehouse. We're very, we don't want to share, right? Because the more I open the storehouse and distribute it, the less I'm going to have. But Lord Chaitanya's storehouse is the infinite storehouse of love of God. And the more we open the doors and distribute that love of God, the more supplies are in the storehouse. That doesn't even make sense to us, does it? The more you distribute, the more you have. The more you distribute, the more you have to distribute. That's the magic of it all. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, he's Krishna Prema Pradayate, Mahavadanyaya Avatar. He is the appearance of Krishna in this world that is more magnanimous, more generous, more charitable than any other incarnation, including Krishna himself. Because he came to give what nobody else ever gave, and that was free distribution of love of God. And you only have to pay one price. You know, if you want to come get 10 pounds of rice from my storehouse, you're going to have to pay a good price. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is distributing love of God for a very, very cheap price. And here's the price, and hopefully you have that much money in your pocket to pay for it. The only cost of this love of Godhead distribution is the desire to have it. You just have to desire to have it. You don't have to come and give anything in exchange. Like, okay, here's my, $12 or my $1,200. Give me 20 pounds of your love of God. All you have to do is want it. And the reason we don't want it sufficiently, the reason why we're not like hankering for it, lowly on greed, I have to have it, I got to get it, I won't stop till I get it. The reason we don't have that drive to passionately want it is because we actually harbor hopes of finding satisfaction elsewhere. Actually. We might say, no, I don't. Don't accuse me of that. I'm really smart and I'm really experienced. I've been fried, right? Once burned, twice fried. Is that how it goes? Once burned. Anyway. Yeah. Once burned, twice shy, or once burned, twice fried. So we will say, I don't have any silly ideas of finding satisfaction in this material world. But the proof that we actually do harbor doubts, the proof that we actually do harbor hopes of finding happiness somewhere other than Krishna is that we don't just cry for love of God. That's how much we want. We have to want. The more you want it, the more you get. If you just come by like, here's free samples of love of God being passed out on the corner, right? There you go, free samples, free samples, free samples. Yeah, I'm good. Right? They walk by, I'm good. Yeah, give it to somebody else who needs it. Right? Give it to somebody else. I'm good. Oh yeah, I'll take a little one. Okay, thanks. But we should be like, I'll take all of it, Because the more you take, the more there is to distribute. You don't have to feel like you're being selfish, like, oh no, if I take one, then my neighbor can't get one. No, the more you take, the more there's available for your neighbor. Right? So, this is the importance of today's text, where Krishna says that my pure devotees, Tushyanti cha ramanti cha, they experience full satisfaction and full bliss by always conversing about me, by chanting my holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, and coming together to hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So this temple is offering that opportunity every morning, every weekend. 24 hours a day we can come together with devotees and do some hearing and chanting, and come to this platform of Tushyanti cha ramanti cha, that which we're all looking for. So we'll stop there, see if there's any discussion. Anybody? No,
You give a bunch of examples that made me wonder if there's a connection between dissatisfaction and envy.
yes. Thank you. When we're not self-satisfied for the impersonalist means satisfied with Brahman realization, satisfied with just Atmananda, satisfaction of the self, the spirit different from the body. But real satisfaction is Premananda, that we're satisfied with the bliss that comes from loving exchanges with Krishna. But in either case, whether one is experiencing Brahmananda or Premananda, one is considered self-satisfied. And when one's not self-satisfied, they're looking for satisfaction still, right? So when I see that you are experiencing what I think I see, that you're experiencing some kind of pleasure, some kind of satisfaction, like I'm experiencing, let's say, economic troubles, I'm like always in anxiety about how to pay the bills, and but I see, you got an inheritance and you just got it made in the shade and you don't have to worry about money ever, then I become envious because you have something that I want. So I either have to bring you down to my platform of suffering, or I have to somehow raise myself up to your level of fortune. So there's always competition. So in the spiritual world, in spiritual consciousness, I should say, there's no competition because there's no envy. We don't compete because I don't need anything. I'm already self-satisfied. And once you're self-satisfied, you don't need anything. Because it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor or hungry or satisfied with a meal or this or that. You're satisfied. So due to dissatisfaction, we experience envy and therefore exploitation, competition, hatred, war, fighting, etc., etc., etc. So the solution to all the problems in the world is self-satisfaction. And interestingly, this pandemic, which has, somehow forced people to stay home, not go out and socialize, and be stuck at home with their family, etc., has, when they say like hang your dirty laundry out for all to see, it's brought to our forefront how dissatisfied we are. Because we're at home with our family members instead of going out and socializing and going to restaurants and going to movies. We're stuck at home with these people, and we realize I'm not satisfied hanging out with my family members. And we fight and this and that, Or I'm just, I'm not absorbed in hearing and chanting, so I'm at home and bored. I mean, I'm sorry, but I've actually talked to devotees on the phone, and they're telling me how bored they are. Because they can't go to this place and that, it's like, makes me sad because devotees should be showing by their example. And even if we can't have all this external stimuli, we can be totally satisfied sitting in a little apartment with my family members and just being satisfied with my Krishna consciousness through hearing and chanting and Bodayantas Parasparam constantly, Katayantascha Mam Nityam constantly speaking about me, enlightening one another. So we can measure, I think actually Prabhupada ended that purport in the 13th chapter that I was looking at. He said that one needs a way of measuring one's spiritual advancement. How do you know you're making spiritual advancement? You pull out your yardstick and measure it. So what's that yardstick? So Prabhupada ends that purport by saying we need a way of measuring our advancement. And how do we measure our advancement? By going through that list of 20 qualities and seeing how much have I developed those qualities. Right? So satisfaction. And if I'm not satisfied, okay, that shows me where I'm at. Means material consciousness. So we have to help each other. That's what this verse is all about. That my pure devotees associate with each other and enliven each other by always conversing about me. And in this way, by group, Sankirtan means in a group, like-minded persons, then Tushyanti Chara Mantucha, satisfaction and bliss will manifest.
important aspect of our movement. So much so that even the Supreme Lord, of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed that how much he loves to hear and chant. He had Vasu Ghosh Prabhu chant for him, he would hear, or Vakreshwar Pandit would chant for days together, he would hear. And the Lord also says in the Puranas also that Aham na tishtami vaikunte, yatra matbhakta gayati tatra tishtami nan. So I am not in Vaikuntha. Wherever my devotees sing and glorify me, I'm there, listening to them, I will be there. So Krishna shows by example how much we should listen and hear the
Yes.
relationship.
And that is why, thank you for that point, that is why when the devotees get together, Katayam Taschamam Nityam, they constantly talk about me. Why, when they do that, are they experiencing satisfaction and bliss? Because Krishna manifests there. The verse that you just quoted. Krishna says, that's where I manifest. I don't manifest in the heart of the yogi, as Raja Krishna. I don't manifest in Vaikuntha. I manifest where my pure devotees are talking about me. That's why we experience satisfaction and bliss, because Krishna is the source of that satisfaction and bliss. Interestingly, the Bible says the same thing. Where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am.
Who is saying this?
Well, it's
That
supposed
was
to
in poems, huh? That was before Jesus, so it wasn't like Jesus invented it.
yeah, it's supposed to be like an Old Testament, like God is speaking.
Yeah. It also says that the word of God is God.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is to Moses or something? Specific?
Okay, anything else?
No, I think it's written by King David in poems.
Uh-huh.
A patriot. It's a poet.
Yeah. All right, then we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Anantaraj Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai. Looks like the something's been served.